So AgXcel is happy to announce our second revision to the GX5 hydraulic pump series. This model is our LFP80 pump, and what we've done is we've just changed all the plumbing on the pump. We wanted to make a more compact package, and that's what we were able to accomplish with all of our hydraulic pump series. Looking at this LFP80 though, on the inlet down here we'll have a 2-inch flange, and then down here this will be the recirculation back into the inlet side, but we'll go over that in just a bit. And then we'll have our inlet hose that goes into our LFP80 pump. Here would be our outlet hose. And then as we come out of our outlet hose, we have a T here. This will go into our adjustable bypass valve. So this will go back into the inlet of the system. So right here is your 2-inch inlet. This recirculation valve goes back to the inlet. So a lot of guys will use this for agitation. Either if they want to run it back to the tank, you can just cut your hose and run a tank back to the tank, and then you can just put a cap here on this inlet. Or if you wanted to keep it as it is, how we keep it plumbed, then it's just a recirculation valve back into the inlet. A lot of setups like V-Apply will require you to use this, so it's another option for you. Or say if you wanted to run the pump lower than what it's rated for, if you recirculate some of that flow back into the inlet of the pump, that's another purpose as well. Coming down from the inlet here, we'll go into our pressure gauge, and there's another T down here. This will go into the spike valve of the LFP80 pump here. The spike valve opens up at 100 pounds of pressure, and it's just a safety valve. Even though the pump itself is rated for 290 pounds, most of the plumbing on here is rated still for less than that. It's still rated for over 100 pounds, but there's no need for the pressure to get to 100 pounds or higher. So it's just another safety valve that recirculates back to the inlet of the system in case if it were to deadhead. So as we move from the recirculation valve to the spike valve, we then come to the magnetic flow meter, which all of our GX5 and GX2 series of pumps utilize. And then from the flow meter, you can run a hose barb out to your manifold system. And here's the LFP120 model. The plumbing is identical to the LFP80. So looking at the inlet here, 2-inch flange, we come in on the outlet side of the spike valve. We'll go into the pump. Here we will come out of the pump. You have your recirculation valve. Then you'll come from out of the pump. Here's your pressure gauge. Your spike valve inlet would be down here. And then once again, we'll go into the magnetic flow meter, and then you can go out into your suction valves or to your manifold system. The next model is the LFP120. That's the 4-diaphragm pump. Looking at your inlet here, once again, it is a 2-inch flange. We'll then run to this elbow that goes into the inlet of the pump. Here will be the outlet of the pump going into another T, which will lead up to the pressure gauge, and will then also lead into the pressure relief valve, which just goes back into the inlet of the pump system. This here is the bleeder valve that we include on all of our pumps. Say if you're priming the system up and if you have an airlock somewhere, you can open up that bleeder valve, let the air out. Once you start getting a steady stream of liquid coming out, then you know that the pump is primed up. Go ahead and close that bleeder valve, and then your system should start applying product down at the rows. As we keep following through, we have another T, which will lead again to that 100-pound spike valve that goes back to the inlet of the system. So if we keep going, we'll come into the magnetic flow meter, and then from out of the magnetic flow meter, you can run into your suction valves or into your manifold. And this one's our largest GX5 pump model that we offer, the LFP250. It's a 6-headed diaphragm pump. As we come in through the 2-inch flange inlet, we'll then go to the inlet of the pump. Here we have the outlet of the pump. We'll come into this T, which will lead to our pressure gauge, and then we'll have our manual pressure relief valve. As we continue through the plumbing, here's another T, which will go to our spike valve. And then our last piece will then lead to our magnetic flow meter, and then you can run your outlet to your manifold that you have. So here is the older version of the GX5 pump that we've been using for several years. As we look at our inlet here we have our 2-inch flanged inlet. As we continue through the system, we'll come to our filter. As we go through the filter, we'll then go into the pump. We will come out of the pump here, and then we have our T, which will lead to our manual bypass valve. Again, this is where guys sometimes would cut this hose. They'd run that hose to their tank and they can set up some sort of agitation. Or if you're using a V-apply setup where you have to use this bypass valve for the setup, you can open that up and have some sort of internal recirculation back into the pump. You could also use it as a pressure relief valve if you needed to, though I'd recommend changing out your orifices, because if you open this up too much, you're going to recirculate too much product. You're not going to get enough liquid out to the rows. So, but that could be another use for it. We have your elbow right here, which will then lead to our bleeder valve for priming. As we go past that T though, if we go this direction, we have our 100-pound spike gauge. Again, that is our pressure relief valve that opens at 100 pounds and will just internally recirculate product so that if you were to have a deadhead, you don't just keep building up pressure until something gives. This will help from, say, the tops of your red balls blowing off or any sort of leaking on your flange fitting to where you'd have to replace a gasket. Here we have a 160-pound pressure gauge, and then this would lead to our outlet, which would then lead to our flow meter. As we look at the newer version, it's definitely a lot more compact because we don't have this big arm sticking out. So what we did is here on the inlet, we still use the same 2-inch flange. This is the return to the pressure relief valve. This is the return to the 100-pound spike valve. And then here you can see your elbow, which will go into the inlet of the pump system here. Here's our second elbow with our smaller hose. That would be our outlet. And then once more, here is our pressure relief valve, which that hose goes back to the inlet. But again, if you wanted to cut this and run a hose to your tank, you could do that and then just cap this end so that you're not pulling in air. As we come out of the T, we're still going on the outlet side. We have our pressure gauge, and then just behind our pressure gauge here is our 100-pound spike valve. And then as we continue with our plumbing, we then come out to our flow meter, which then we can get product out to our manifolds. So what's so special about the GX5 series of diaphragm pumps that AgXcel offers? Well, the first part is that it's a diaphragm pump. So your main benefit versus a centrifugal pump is that these diaphragm pumps, you can run dry a lot longer than you can a centrifugal pump before you would have any sort of issue. I've ran centrifugal pumps before where if you ran them dry for 30 seconds, the seal burns out. Now you have to go find a new seal or just spend over $1,000 to get a new pump. You're taking several hours out of your day. It's not worth it. These diaphragm pumps, I've ran them dry half an hour before. Not that you should do it, but it's just something that I've done before, and they've been fine. What'll happen though if you run these pumps dry for really long is that you'll start to dry out the diaphragms that are inside. They'll start to crack, and then you have issues where your oil is leaking out or either fertilizer is leaking into your pump. Not ideal. So if you were to have some sort of priming issue though, you don't have to worry. The pump's not going to break on you if you let it run dry for a minute. So the other benefit is that these pumps are positive displacement. A lot of your centrifugal pumps out there aren't positive displacement. So what that means is for every revolution this pump is making, it's putting out the same amount of product. Sure, I could run this pump at 30 gallons per minute, then I could run a centrifugal pump at 30 gallons per minute. And in 1 minute, I'll still have 30 gallons. But that centrifugal pump, you don't know how much product it's putting out for every revolution it's doing versus this positive displacement diaphragm pump you do. With the diaphragm pump, you're going to get a steady stream out the row versus you're getting maybe a little more, a little less, a little more, a little less for every rotation that's doing, which will then translate to your fertilizer that's going in furrow. The diaphragm pump keeps it steady, so you're always getting the same consistent amount for every revolution that pump is doing. For every acre you're putting out, you're getting a consistent stream. Looking at the inside of the pump, this would be your diaphragm. Each one of these heads that's on the pump, depending on the size of the pump, depends on how many heads you have. You'll have a diaphragm on the inside. One end will be marked for oil, which is right here. Then the other end isn't marked, and that's where you know your fertilizer goes. If you want to see this pump broken down, we have a video of that, of just doing general maintenance, of changing out the diaphragms and changing out the valves on the inside. Check that video out. So these diaphragm pumps are rated for 550 RPM, and the motor that we use is rated for 550 RPM. Now this motor and this pump and this PWM setup you can use on any sort of controller you have, either if it's any of the Raven or John Deere models, Case, AgLeader, Trimble, or even if you want to run it through Precision Planning, either if it's V-Apply Base or V-Apply HD, these pumps can handle that. Every single controller minus the V-Apply base are all going to use the same motor. When it comes to the V-Apply base, because that requires the speed sensor to be used, we have a motor that's just about identical. The only difference is that on this side, there's going to be a speed sensor that's sticking out of it. We have a cable that comes with it that plugs directly into Precision Planning's harnessing that they have, and then you're good to go. Put in your setups, plug and play. Looking at the PWM block that is on here, we have your P, which will be your inlet side, and then you have your T, which will be your outlet to the tank. Looking at the top of the valve here, this is going to be your solenoid where your 2-pin PWM plug is going to go into, and this is your red stem. We also call it your override stem. So say if you wanted to run this pump system and bypass all of your electronics, say if you wanted to run it while you're throttling your hydraulics, in case if you're having some sort of electrical issues, I can push down on this, turn it counterclockwise, half a rotation. You'll hear that click, that stem will come up. At this point, once the stem is coming up, the stem, if it were down, it would stop flow from going into this block. But since the stem is now up, whatever hydraulic flow you're sending to this block, it's going to run that pump at however many gallons per minute of hydraulic fluid you have sent to this. So if you max out your hydraulic fluid, this pump is going to run at max RPM at max rate. So say if I want to put it down, turn it again, half a rotation, you'll hear it click, close again. That means now it's going to run off of my rate controller that I have. So when your PWM is plugged in, what it's going to do, the solenoid is going to magnetize, depending on how much voltage is being sent to it, is how strong this is going to magnetize and raise that stem so far. So say if I only want to put out 5 gallons per minute, let's say it's only a quarter of what the pump can handle, it's only going to raise the stem a quarter of the way up, so it's not going to let in as much hydraulic fluid. When the pump works in conjunction with the flow meter in your rate controller, that's how the rate controller will determine how far to lift the stem to let the pump know how much hydraulic fluid it needs to run at the appropriate rate. Then the oil that's used in these pumps, they're nothing special, it's nothing proprietary, it's just a non-detergent SAE 30 oil. We sell the oil as well, but if you don't have a quart from us, just go to your whatever local store you have nearby, pick up a quart of oil. The larger pumps might use up to 2 quarts of oil, but these smaller 3 diaphragm pumps, they only use about a quart of oil. That's all the newest changes that we've done to the GX5 series of pumps. Call today for pricing and any questions you have.